Hi, I'm Parker Miley,
I'm Tim Benjamin.
and this is the Rage Podcast, where today we are going to talk about it's not always appropriate to be polite. All right, you can tell I'm very excited about this this topic.
This is maybe the best topic we've had in a while.
Because I often will find myself not being polite sometimes, and not always can I defend myself, but sometimes
it's not always in the right. Yeah.
Sometimes it is. Sometimes being polite is what you should not do.
Yeah. One of the big weapons I think that Satan uses against us often in a lot of different forms is the fact that we are polite people. And again, that's not a rip. We're not ripping on anybody for being polite. We don't want you to run around and be a jerk all the time. But at the same time, there are situations where they will use your desire to be nice against you. And a lot of places out there, because you're going to be polite, again, as most of the time you probably should be, but once in a while, you're going to find yourself in a situation where you're like, I don't need to be overly rude here, but I can't go along with what's happening.
You can't just keep on.
Yeah. Keeping the peace is usually a good thing, but not always.
Because sometimes being polite is also kind of viewed as encouraging, because if other people, say, let me just throw out one clear example, and this happens in our world. I mean, you can talk to Tim, and I've had we have experiences with some people every once in a while that oftentimes we are polite to, I'm sure. I know I am.
Yep.
When I probably shouldn't have been
and
so polite.
And it's not because we're pastors.
Everyone goes through it. Anyone. You work at an office, when you're encountering people, right? When you're constantly with people, this happens, right? So someone, you're having a friendly conversation, or someone comes up to you and they say, my dog last night told me that my house was going to burn down if I didn't jump up and down 3 times, on my bed, right? Believe it or not, those situations do sometimes happen.
Oh, I've actually had it happen.
Where
I one time had a lady tell me her cat told me my treasurer was having an affair. My 78-year-old treasurer was having an affair.
So.
And what did I say in response? Well, did the cat say anything else? Cat's apparently pretty informed.
I mean.
But, yeah.
But sometimes there's just complete. I shouldn't probably say that word, but
there's a time where you got to call people on stuff. Yeah. Okay.
Like
you can't let things go.
You can't just be like. You can't just say, "Wow, you have like wow, your dog or cat's really just
really
impressive."
Really out there. That's right? that future prediction thing. Yeah.
When we know with a sound mind that your dog probably didn't tell you anything. Yeah. Right? Your dog was probably wondering, why on earth are you jumping up and down on your bed?
If anybody's watching this podcast, you think your dog is telling you something, we need you to call somebody right now.
Call someone immediately.
Immediately.
But in most situations, and I catch myself doing this because there's been some of those bizarre things that people say, and I just say, well, that's really cool, to be polite. Because it's like, I'm not going to call someone out on being crazy right now, right? But really, I don't think that's always the most appropriate thing for us to do when we get into some of those bizarre situations.
Well, there'll come times when something will come along, and we've all been in this. Let's expand our example here a little. We've all been in a group where somebody's being a jerk, all right? It's a group of people, maybe a group project, a thing at work, something. And somebody's being a jerk, and everybody's just kind of accommodating this person's delightful disposition, and pretty much everybody learns how to manage this person or deal with this person or whatever. And a lot of times, I'm not pointing any fingers at anybody. I'm not pointing at myself. I've been there where you just kind of grin and bear it, think we're gonna get through this, and something. But every once in a while, somebody like that needs somebody to say, you're kind of a jerk. You're kind of taking this a little far. And it's not about it's not about this angry confrontation, because that's not going to get you anywhere. But every once in a while, you got to call somebody on their stuff. If they're stepping out of line, and if it's an accident or if it's one time, let that go. But
everyone has bad days, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. Everybody gets the benefit of the doubt. But once you're beyond that, there comes a time when you got to say something. And by not saying something, you're actually doing that person a disservice. Because if they don't... assuming they don't realize they're being such a problem, that's going to have an impact on their quality of life. And everybody, suddenly they're the person that everybody has to tolerate in every situation. And I can't say nobody wants that, but most people probably don't.
It's the same situation as when you have something in your teeth, if your fly's down, or if your hair's all messed up, and somebody
put a kick me sign on your back.
Someone put a kick me sign on your back, right? Yeah. It's the same situation, and honestly, some people just walk by or don't say anything when they had a full conversation. And if you're like me, please, if there's something in my teeth, let me know. All right, I'm do far too many things and talk to far too many people to have.
Well, y'all hate that moment when you get home. You're like, oh dear, how long was that there?
How long? Yeah. I mean, like that's just. Hey, here's a little help to your situation here.
Yeah, you're not doing anybody any favors by being that polite. I'll give you another example. Obviously, having led, and Parker's kind of starting off on this, led lots and lots of church services. There are certain things that work and certain things that don't. And as pastors, we've all had that Sunday when we thought we really had something, and it just wasn't. It didn't happen. And sometimes you need people to tell you that. I'll give you another example here from Wayne Street. We had an experiment we were doing a couple years ago where we were doing the announcements in a specific way on the screen. I thought it was working great. I thought it was a great idea. We kind of had them up on the screen, and there were some videos with it. I thought it was neat. And I put it out to staff, and we're like, look at this cool thing. And all the staff was like, nah, we think that's terrible. and I remember writing back saying, well, thank you, because here the emperor has no clothes. It's back to that story. And because I thought this thing was incredible and everybody else hated it. So, because my staff, who really never felt the compunction to be, polite to me, were happy to tell me they thought it was terrible. So we axed it. And even though I thought it was a good idea. So there are times that you're going to appreciate people telling you the truth. Because, look, if I'd had a staff that was afraid of me, which clearly I don't.
I'm terrified every day of my
terrified.
Life.
Can you tell? But sometimes I need them to say, well, this sermon series, I'm not sure, or this new small group study, or this way of doing this. Once in a while, we all need somebody to tell us, I'm not feeling this. And again, it's not because we don't like you. It's not because you're a terrible person. It's just because we want you to be effective in whatever it is you're trying to do. And if we're not willing to stand up and say, this is unraveling before your eyes and you don't realize it, you're going to step out on a bridge that's not going to be there.
Yeah.
And that's the problem we run into.
And this comes, I find this in my life because I love, debating, right? I love to prove somebody wrong. I can attest to that, yes. There's no greater thrill than walking away from an argument knowing that you're right, okay? That's me. And is it a bad thing? 110%, because I know it's bad, but sometimes I just cannot resist saying, hey, I'm right, you're wrong, and that's how I sometimes live my life. Not good thing. Probably very sinful, actually, all right? But sometimes I just can't resist.
We all appreciate that about him. I know he makes me work for everything, and I appreciate that.
Yeah. See, and sometimes it produces good things as a result, right?
Yeah, sometimes.
But theology, all right, and if theology is a big word, but pretty much your beliefs upon your faith, all right? That's what that kind of sums up, okay? We believe a lot of things, and especially in the United Methodist Church, we like to be one big tent, okay? Where some of us completely disagree on certain things, but we're still able to fit under the tent of United Methodist Church, okay?
And so far, that's true.
And Tim has been in this group for much longer than I have, but we fit a lot of audiences within the United Methodist Church.
You can find very liberal, very conservative, and everything in between in the Methodist Church. Mm-hmm.
And so
which is a very, very good thing.
And it's very, I'm not hating that at all.
I know. Mm-hmm.
Because that is one of the beauties of what is the United Methodist Church. Yep. But that also allows me to have experiences with some people that I completely don't agree with. and that's okay. I don't always view it as okay in the moment because, that it doesn't happen. But so say someone exposes to me to one of their philosophies, one of their theological points or something like that. And if you know me, I love traditional Wesleyan theology. It's
in the entire history of the Rage podcast, you've never heard a truer sentence than that one.
That is where I reside. And if you don't, and probably many of you out there are not theology buffs like me that love to just study and learn and be able to answer all those crazy questions that some people may ask. But if you are, I encourage you to be one because there's no better way of life than that. But But anyway, so someone comes up to me, and here's one of the big debates. Why do United Methodists baptize infants? Okay? And now here's how Methodist theology works in its modern eyes, okay? United Methodist theology. If we can pretty much find one Bible verse that supports it, we're going to at least deem it okay.
Yeah, we're going to consider it. Yeah. Talk about it, whatever.
And that's how we get all these Big Ten ideas, right? Because not everyone believes that baptizing infants is okay. Mm-hmm. But you can find pieces of scripture where household baptisms were a thing. We can only assume that in a household, you're also going to be baptizing some children, right? That is kind of where we took our stance on that as the United Methodist Church, that allows us to baptize infants. And then you also have prevenient grace, but that's a whole nother topic and everything like that.
Yeah, our idea of grace is where that grows out of, sure.
Yes, so our idea of grace, but there's also scripture to back it up.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
And that's kind of how that process works. So, boom, some people believe in infant baptism. Some United Methodist churches do not believe in infant baptism because, again, we're a very large tent.
Yep.
I was baptized as an infant.
So was I.
I as a pastor now, eventually, when I will be ever given permission to do so, will eventually be baptizing probably some infants, and I will be okay with that, all right? Because I claim true to that theology. However, there's some people that say absolutely not. And when you have that discourse, it's sometimes a lot easier to just, okay, all right, you're fine, because we're in this big tent. We all have kind of the basics down and everything. But sometimes it's absolutely not okay to just let someone wander along, because good and healthy discussion exists. That's really what the United Methodist Church was founded
and that's upon. Part of the strength of like he's talking about with baptism. That's why we have these positions, is because now we can all talk about them because they're all permissible, but not required.
Yeah.
As far you're not required to have your child baptized, of course. So, but people who are believers are encouraged to, later in life then to be baptized. But that opens up a lot of discussion, and in discussion is where we learn. If you can have a civil discussion with somebody, which is a big if in this day and age, but if you can, whether it be politics or religion or whatever, if you can have a civil discussion with somebody, you will come away with that, probably not having your mind changed, but you'll know why you have your position because of that
and
conversation.
You will be able
That's where the strength comes from.
And you'll be better able to understand why some people believe differently.
Right.
Because this is what the topic is. The topic is not threatening in any way. It's not threatening at all. Right? Nothing's going to really change if I change my mind or they change their mind. Right. Whoever it is.
Yeah,
right?
Because it's not about winning.
It's not about winning. But it's a matter of discussing why they believe what they believe, right? Because I can agree to some extent why some people baptize at an older age, right?
I understand that.
I can understand why some people hold true to that.
Yep.
Do I but do I disagree on some things? Absolutely. Do I encourage infant baptism? Absolutely.
But we miss that entire discussion if we're just going to be polite and say, well, you do you.
Well, yeah.
There's no discussion in that.
There's
no conversation.
And that was simple because that one, no one's getting harmed.
Correct.
But say I don't baptize any of my church members. Or I baptize them.
There are churches out there like that.
Or I baptize them in a mud puddle, right? Because in the water, those things, because that's another big thing. Water is an important piece of baptism, right? You can't just go baptizing anyone in any liquid, right? And so, those are kind of the big things where it's like, okay, that's where maybe being polite specifically is not okay, right? Because that's going to cause a rift rather than baptizing infants or baptizing older people. That doesn't cause a rift. Now, but there's several of those topics that are going to cause some form of interference, right?
There are some topics even around baptism or whatever, you're going to have to agree to disagree, and that's okay. But have the conversation first.
Yeah.
Don't just say, whatever. I mean, because you don't learn from that. You don't grow from that. It's that actually this is part of the motivation all the way back behind the Rage podcast. Parker and I obviously agree on quite a number of things, but we're always saying jump in the comments and tell us we're wrong, because that helps us understand where we are. And I think when we're either afraid to have that conversation or not allowed to have that conversation or not willing to have that conversation, if your position is never challenged, you never learn anything. And I think it's in the conversation that politeness gets us out of. It's in having the conversation that we actually grow. And that's really what's the important thing behind the conversation. It's not about, not every conversation is about changing somebody's mind. It might be about establishing what's in your own. Mm-hmm. And when we just say, whatever's fine, or
when you just walk through it politely saying, well, that's a cool idea. That's an interesting way of thinking.
Yeah, there's nothing. There's no substance there.
Sometimes you cannot be polite on every topic, and you cannot be polite to every person, grow. Right?
Actually, there's scripture about this. It means you're blown around by every doctrine that comes along, and that's what politeness does. Is whatever the latest idea is, or whatever the idea of the person standing in front of you is. Well, that's what I am too. There's no leadership there. There's no growth there. There's no desire to figure out where you're at on any particular issue. If that's all we do, politeness again. While it's a value, we're not saying it's bad. We should always be polite, but I think we mistake politeness with respect. Mm-hmm. I can disagree with you and still respect you. Absolutely. But and we can have a conversation where we talk about things, and I may walk away saying, I don't agree with that. I can still be respectful to you. Yeah. But I don't necessarily have to agree with you, but we can both come away with a better understanding of where we are based on the conversation that we just had. Politeness pushes that right off the table.
And so what we're saying is you can even have politeness throughout that entire discourse.
Yeah, you don't need to be mean and yell and scream.
But it's a matter of, is the politeness killing the discourse?
Yeah, or not allowing it to even start in the first place.
And that, I think, is a serious problem that is in the church, in our political system here, and in all those situations that cause discourse. Yes. Politeness has often taken over and been killing the future progression of knowledge.
Politeness doesn't allow conversations that may be intense to happen, and they need to happen. And look, this is true in churches, it's true in families, it's true in marriages, it's true in friendships, it's true in job circumstances, all of these things. If we're too polite to have a conversation, then nobody's going to grow. Nobody's going to get better. The jerk in the group is going to continue to be the jerk in the group because no one will say anything. And politeness, again, while a good thing, be polite, but don't let your politeness be your number one value, because sometimes you need to open up your mouth and say, this is not good, or I disagree. Respectfully. You don't have to scream and yell. We don't have to, call the police or anything like that. But the conversation does need to happen. And the goal of the conversation should be, I want to be heard, and I want to hear. Now, I may not like what I hear. I'm probably going to reject what I hear. That's fine. But you have to be able to do those things in order to have the conversation. As soon as the conversation can no longer happen, the organization dies. And I'll say it right now, the United Methodist Church is a perfect example of that. As soon as the conversation was not allowed to happen, the organization as a whole starts to die. And the same thing with families. If you're married and you have a spouse, and there are certain things you're not allowed to talk about, this thing that happened, and we're not allowed to say that relationship is in trouble. And
because you suppress what you're believing, you're not letting anyone in on what you're actually thinking. And it'll ruin a relationship. It will ruin a workforce. It will ruin any organization. When you don't let that out.
It's exactly right. And there are two situations where that happened. The first one is, I'm afraid to be challenged myself. Mm-hmm. And the second one is, I'm afraid to challenge you. And as soon as either of those two things become true, the cohesion of the group begins to fall apart. That's why I tell my staff all the time. I made a joke a little bit ago about them not worried about my feelings. That's a good thing, though, because if there's something going on with one of them or they're upset with me, I want them to come fight with me about it, because in that we can figure out and learn from each other. They can hear me, I can hear them. Parker, you don't have to answer this, but I feel like I do a pretty good job listening and trying to comprehend what's going on. There's a lot happening that I miss. I certainly admit that, but I think at the most part, if somebody comes to talk to me, for the most part, I like to think I listen well. But that's because I'm secure where I'm at. And look, if I screw up, I'll be the first one to say I was wrong. I dropped the ball, had a bad day, and we have to allow for that. Okay, all right, just don't let it happen again. I get that. But as soon as that conversation is not able to happen for any reason, as soon as politeness becomes the only value, because there are no others, the organization's in trouble.
Yep.
And that's what we're getting to today. So don't be afraid. Speak up. Speak your mind. Be respectful. You don't have to yell and be stupid. But at the same time, it is so very vital that everybody gets a chance to be heard and to hear. As soon as either of those things stop happening, the group dynamic it's dead.
And I'm glad I could defend myself today.
Yes. So, all right, everybody. Well, thank you for listening to us while we're here. And certainly, if you've got any comments, we'd love to hear them down below. And we actually do a pretty good job responding to actual comments, not spam. But thank you all for being a part of this conversation. Don't be afraid to speak your mind. Don't be afraid to be challenged. Don't be afraid to challenge, because that's how we grow. At the end of the day, that's what's important. So, thanks for joining us, everybody. Have a great day.